You know, interestingly, it's set in a prison, which seems to be one of the few places where you see lesbian characters now. In mainstream, you know, in mainstream TV, they tend to pop up and then get killed, and then in prison you can see them over a series, you know, over a series. But we also have a creation of queer family in terms of the houses, with gay men of color, and they have you know, mothers, house mothers, and the children. One of the slangs for gayness was "Are you one of the children?" which I love. You know, that term, which is a very black term for describing us as family. So there are many layers to your question, and there are many layers to the film in terms of that. But also, you know, when you watch things, I don't just see what's there, but I see what's behind me in terms of my own history and legacy, and that brought in things to my mind. You know, it's a wonderful film. I really love it.
I mean, yeah, I love what you're saying about being one of the children.
Yeah.
And I think as a Butch woman, I have a Butch mother. She's here.
Where your mommy at? Stand up and be counted. Mommy's hiding.
I know, that's the thing. I know you don't like it. But AJ, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh my god, I didn't know that. Hey, AJ's in Desire.
Yeah. AJ's and I know you've always been slightly embarrassed about it, but I know you know I'm coming from a good place with it.
Oh.
And yeah, definitely like the person who took me in and looked after me and fed me and allowed me to have sex with all the wrong people and never told me not to. And was always there at the end of it, that kind of thing. So, but more generally, like taught me how to be, and taught me that it was okay to be that way, and that it was actually really awesome, and that you could have a wonderful, wonderful life with wonderful people in your life as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's really interesting to see in the film that often Butch women are. Like in the world generally, Butch women are seen as something bad, and Butchness is seen as something bad, female masculinity is seen as bad, but in the film, and in the context of the prison, it's a really positive thing. It's actually something which is really valued.
Yeah.
It's something which is part of surviving.
Yeah.
And that's just really amazing to see. But as I say, it's a little bit of a shame that it has to be within a prison context again, which kind of leads me to my second question. You touched on it already, Campbell, about why is it that lesbians, and particularly black lesbians, only pop up in prisons?
Because we be criminals.
I mean, when I was I really thought you had to go to prison to be a lesbian. Yeah. I honestly believed that.
I thought you had to go to a convent. That's where I was at.
So we've got convents, prisons,
or nuns.
or girls' schools. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I was in that already. It's quite interesting, kind of seeking this all-female kind of.
Yeah. But I mean, I suppose in terms of like filmmaking generally, you both made films, and like it's a shame that black lesbians pop up in these particular prison contexts in film. Why is that? Where else do they pop up? And how can we kind of disrupt that? I know, you know, you're both probably doing work to try and disrupt that. Should we start with Dorett?
You answer that.
That is such a huge question, but I also think films are made. The films that are made that are very well funded are done through a financial structure, through a mainstream financial structure, and the mainstream financial structure decides what we see in a way, what gets seen, what gets distributed, what gets onto your telly. When this film was made, it didn't have a cinema release, actually. They kind of buried it, and it's really hard to get hold of, which is such a shame. I don't know what the story is around that. But it's interesting that it didn't have a cinema release, and you could only see it in festivals, or if you're in America on HBO. And a kind of similar thing happened to Pariah in a way. A lot of times people who finance things will go, there's no market for this. You know, we can't see the market for this film. Who's going to come and watch a bunch of black women? And also they're dark skin. And also nobody's in heels and they're not showing their breasts, you know, because that is their view of what sells to a mass audience, a particular kind of representation of black women and a particular kind of representation of femininity, which is corralled in a way. So in prison, ironically, allows a diversity which they can't seem to see beyond in real life. Like they can't have the studs in real life because now we see studs as criminals, and that was The Wire. The stud character Snoop was a criminal. You know, if you see studs, a lot of times they are criminalized, and that then becomes in our consciousness. Oh, it's a boy. No, it's a drug dealer. Oh, yeah, we can see why she's like that. Do you know what I mean? Highly problematic, but that's because our culture is framed by certain kind of white supremacist patriarchal notion of black womanhood, which has a legacy from slavery. Actually, this is not a coincidence till now. You know, we can't escape it in that way. We can't pretend that film is not influenced by that in some way. Or dominant cinema.
I mean, that leads really quite nicely onto what I was going to say, because if you're talking about decolonizing film, that's part of it. Like any kind of decol work is visceral. It can be quite violent because of the years of the centuries of what we have internalized. And so, I mean, following on from what Campbell said, I mean, everything you said is so pertinent to how we view, make, read, feel film. But it all lives inside of our history, our present. We cannot step outside of that and say, oh, I'm viewing this film from another position. That is impossible. We are all impacted by that history or her stories. We are all impacted by that. And so I agree, it's a huge question, because then it also becomes a bit layered. Because does it then mean that the queer people make films about queer people? Like the blacks make film about blacks? The whites make film about whites? But it's never framed that way, right?
No.
Like white people make film, it's film. It's not a white film, it's film. Spike Lee is a black filmmaker. It's that thing.
Yeah, they never say Martin Scorsese, the Italian filmmaker, or you know, Coppola, the Italian filmmaker. They never say that. It's always, you're absolutely right. Like everything you said, it's hard to decenter that. But that is so hard to do. And I think even that film was trying to decenter filmmaking in the way in which the narrative was broken. Back to that group discussion. And, you know, Cheryl calls her films Dunye-mentaries, in that they are a bit real. There's a bit of realism in there and a bit of fictionalism in there as well. And I think that's kind of powerful because for a culture, particularly African diasporic culture in the West and maybe possibly in colonial Africa, our history is oral and our history was literally erased and wiped away. So the fictionalization of stories and is important in a way, which is like The Watermelon Woman was a fictionalization of the past because it's often erased and it's only in our imagination. Did that really happen? I don't know if it did or not. Was she really black? Oh, I can't tell because there's nothing written down. She was erased or she was passing, you know, all those sorts of things. So it's kind of hard to grasp hold of our history sometimes and our stories. And I think there are parallels with queer history. You know, was that person transgender? Like, were they? Or were they gay? You know, because there's no records, or the records are very different to how they would be written now. So.
I guess then finally I wanted to ask similarly really big and possibly irritating questions about